would be war. Notice how Jesus put it. Read it together with me, please. Matthew 24, verse 6. You'll hear of what? Wars and rumors of wars. Somebody says, haven't we had war down through the centuries? How could war possibly be a sign of the times? Now remember, there are more than 20 different signs. No one sign is a sign of the times, but when you take them all together. Jesus did not say there would be a war. He said there'd be what? Wars and rumors of wars. Jesus predicted that just before the end, there'd be international conflicts on a global scale. May I remind you that the 20th century was the bloodiest century of all. We had World War I. We had World War II. Notice Jesus didn't say there'd be a war. What did he say? For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. When you look back at the 20th century, we could call it the century of bloodshed. In the 20th century, there are 165 wars, which killed more than 6,000 people. That is in each war. 5 of these claim more than 6 million victims. In the 20th century, the bloodiest century in human history, there were 180 million deaths from war alone. So Jesus said there'd be war. He said there'd be rumors of war. Think of the 20th century. World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Indochina conflict, the Iran-Iraq War, the Middle East conflicts, the tribal wars in Africa. It seemed that that century was just exploding with war, with 186 million deaths. But think of the 21st century, what we're already experiencing, and we're just 18 years into it. The Second Congo War, the war on terrorism. Of course, you've got Iran and Iraq thrown in there. You've got Afghanistan, the Darfur conflict, the Israeli-Lebanese conflict, Russia-Georgia conflict, Baluchistan War, the Burundi Civil War, Ivory Coast Civil War, India-Bangladesh conflict, Ethiopia-Somalia War, Ukraine, you got the problems with Russia. So when you look around the world, there is a lot of instability. Jesus said there would be wars and rumors of wars, and indeed, that's taking place. You look at the increasing tension between the United States and Russia and North Korea. The North Korea situation is really frightening. We thank God for every overture for peace, but we recognize as well that the leader of North Korea is incredibly unpredictable. And if they get nuclear weapons, which some indications are, at least they are well on their road to that, there has never been a weapon made that hasn't been used. And so when you look at it, increasing tension, the Cold War seems to be revived again today. We're living in very, very traumatic times. Jesus said there'll be wars and rumors of wars. But the interesting thing is, the opposite side of the war coin is movements toward peace. And Jesus, the Apostle Paul, said there'll be fragile peace agreements. Listen to how Paul puts it. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 3. When they say peace and safety, better translation here in the New Testament for safety is security. When they say peace and security, then sudden destruction comes upon them. They'll not escape. Isn't it rather fascinating? Nations are talking about peace, but they're arming for war. Nations are signing peace treaties while at the same time they arm and prepare for war. We shake hands in peace while privately and secretly we prepare to destroy our neighbors. You know, when you look back after World War I, you have the Treaty of Versailles in June 28, 1919, and that leads to the League of Nations. And so World War I was to be a war that would end wars. That really, when you look at the League of Nations, it was to bring all nations together. But then we have the Second World War that breaks out and the establishment of the United Nations in 1945. And we thank God for all efforts of peace, but we recognize that there'll never be permanent peace until Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, comes. And here, the UN was supposed to solve the problems of war. But yet, we continually see the conflicts breaking out. You remember back when that historic moment when President Clinton got Rabin and Arafat together there, and they shook hands, and we thought, this is going to solve the problem of the Israeli-Arab conflict. But yet it hasn't. Still terrorist acts take place in Jerusalem. Still there's conflict with the Palestinians and the Israelis when they say peace and safety. So what does the Bible predict? First, it predicts there'll be false Christs and false prophets. It predicts there'll be a rise of the psychic phenomena. It predicts that there'll be messianic-like figures that rise. It then predicts that there'll be wars and conflicts that break out on an unprecedented scale internationally. It then predicts that there'll be peace movements at a time when peace talks dominate the news over nuclear proliferation. Could we be on the verge of a nuclear catastrophe? There are some thinkers that think that. Now, the Bible teaches in the book of Revelation that Christ will come at a time when the human race has the potential to destroy itself. Here's one of the most remarkable prophecies in Revelation. It's found in Revelation 11, verse 18. The nations were angry, and your wrath is come on the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that you should reward your servants, the prophets, and the saints. Now, when is this? Nations are angry, instability. The time of God's wrath has come, the second coming of Christ, that he would reward. Remember, Revelation 22, verse 11 and 12 says that he's coming to give out his rewards. So Jesus would come. This is speaking obviously about the second coming, the return of our Lord. Notice, he would come, and there would be those that fear his name, small and great. But notice he would come to destroy those who destroy the earth. So Revelation is very plain. Christ would come at a time when the human race has the capacity, when the human race has the ability to destroy the earth. How many people here are in the military today, or you've served in the military? I want to pay tribute to you. How many are in the military or you've served in the military? I thank God for all those who have protected our nation through the years. Now, we've got some solid military people here. Let's suppose you were fighting a war 200 years ago. Could you have destroyed the earth with the weapons you had 200 years ago? No. Not at all. What about 100 years ago? No. What about 50 years ago? But is it possible today to destroy the world if indeed there were a full-scale nuclear war? Yes. Scientists say yes. But you look at the thousands of years of human history, that has only become a reality in this generation. And Jesus says he's going to come to destroy those that do what? Destroy the earth. When you look at the atomic bomb blast in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, when William Ripley, of Believe It or Not fame, was a journalist, when he saw that, he said, I'm standing on the place, 1945, where the end of the world began. I'm standing on the place where the end of the world began. Woody Allen, popular actor, makes this statement that I think is a statement that is hopeless. It really speaks about postmodern despair of this generation. More than any other time in history, mankind faces a crossroads. I agree with him on that. One path leads to despair and hopelessness, the other to total extinction. Boy, that's not very optimistic, is it? What if you're going down a road and one path leads to hopelessness and the other path leads to total distinction? You want to take either of those paths? I thank God we're not headed down that road. Because Jesus said, John 14, 1-3, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me, Jesus said. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again, Jesus said. Here is the incredible good news. When the leading thinkers of this world are baffled by the future, Jesus is coming again. Dr. Harold Urey was a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry. And he was a member of the Uranium Committee on the key operation of U-235. And he said, I write this to frighten you. No, he's not a theologian. He's not a preacher preaching from the confines of a church or a pulpit. He says, I write this to frighten you. I'm a frightened man myself. All the scientists I know are frightened for their lives and frightened for your life. As I travel the world and I see the instability of human governments, if I did not know the end of the story, I'd be a frightened man. But our hearts can be filled with hope. We can live lives of meaning and joy. The hope of the second coming of Christ is not simply pie in the sky by and by. It's a burning reality in our hearts that gives us new purpose for living. It puts a spring in our step. It puts a sparkle in our eyes because we see the same thing that others see, but we interpret it differently. We interpret it as the reality of the fact that there is no security or stability in this world. Jesus is coming again. Now here's the nuclear club.